Warning: this podcast contains graphic material such as domestic abuse, child abuse, and murder. Viewer discretion is advised.
Judith, Barsi, and Maria Viravaz were both immigrants from Hungary. Both of them were fleeing the Hungarian People's Republic during the 1956 uprising in search of a better life in the USA. The pair did not meet until years later at a California restaurant where Maria worked as a waitress. Both Maria and Judith had been married previously but had since been divorced and later married each other. Judith had a troubled childhood, as his father had left before he was even born, leaving Judith's mother to care for her son on her own. Judith was ruthlessly bullied by his classmates and teachers for not having his father around, and for having a strong Hungarian accent. Judith began to despise his mother, thinking it was her fault his father decided to leave them. This belief was the start of his bigoted mindset and his hatred for women. After fleeing Hungary, Judith moved to France, where he met his first wife named Clara, with whom he had 2 children with, one boy named Barna and a girl called Agia. Judith developed a drinking problem and began to beat Clara regularly. The family moved to New York, where Judith began to abuse his children as well, which pushed his wife into taking the 2 children and leaving. Judith attempted to reconcile with his wife, but squashed his chances by continuing his drinking and abusive nature. The final straw for Clara was Judith firing a skillet at her during one of his drunken arguments with her, causing Clara to take her 2 children and file for divorce. Sadly, Judith's son Barna suffered from his abusive dad's tendencies and became an alcoholic later in his life, before killing himself. Agia, however, managed to find some passions in her life, such as radio show hosting and writing self-help books. She sadly, however, succumbed to her breast cancer and passed away in 2008. I didn't find much information on Maria's background, and what I found was minimal. Maria grew up in a rural countryside of Hungary with her vulgar father, who was both physically and psychologically abusive towards her. I found nothing relating to her previous marriage or life before she met Judith. Not long after Judith and Maria were married, on June 6, 1978, they had their only daughter, Judith Barsi, a talented and bubbly little girl. Judith was a blonde, blue-eyed, happy-go-lucky little girl who was known to be extremely polite and clever. Little Judith was very short for her age and stood about 3 feet 8 inches tall at the age of 10. Because of her short stature, she eventually began receiving hormone injections to encourage her growth. By the time she could walk, her mother Maria began training Judith to be an actress by teaching her proper poise, manners, and position. Judith was a natural at picking up voice and acting cues, and later learned to ice skate thanks to her mother. When Judith was only 5 years old, an acting company hired Judith on the spot at a skating rink, impressed by the manners and acting skills she demonstrated. Judith will appear in 70 different commercials and have multiple roles in a number of films and movies, such as Cheers, The Twilight Zone, Growing Pains, The Land Before Time, and that trippy animation film, All Dogs Go to Heaven. Because of her impressive income, her family was able to afford a modest 3-bedroom home in the West Hills area of Hollywood. As Judith earned more parts in films and TV shows, her attendance in elementary school started to go down. The little girl would say she was lonely and missed seeing her friends in school. From the Los Angeles Times article about Judith's life, quote, Lisa Williams, age 10, one of her former classmates at Nevada Avenue Elementary School, Lisa said the young actress missed being in school because she missed her friends a lot. Judith often came over to swim in their pool, said Lisa's mother, Linda Williams. Her mother had taught her to be so polite, Williams said. The child was not allowed to go anywhere, few places alone, the neighbor added. End quote. The same article also states, quote, Judith's agent, Ruth Hansen, described her as a bubbly, happy little girl, but her mood changed in the last year of her life. End quote. Judith was not only unhappy with her absence from school, but behind closed doors, her home life was becoming much worse. Her father had always been temperamental, but his drinking, paranoia, and abuse were becoming much worse with his daughter's growing success. Joseph often threatened to kill himself or his wife Maria, and often threatened or directed violence towards her. Joseph sometimes drove drunk, and was arrested 3 times for being intoxicated at the wheel. December 1986, Maria reported Joseph's threats to police. Officers reported that Joseph had strangled Maria and had punched her in the face. However, due to there being no physical marks of abuse on Maria, Maria did not press charges against Joseph. After Maria came forward with her allegations against Joseph stopped drinking but continued to be verbally, emotionally, and physically abusive, his abuse towards Judith becoming much worse. Joseph was a very paranoid and insecure little man who clearly was concerned his wife and daughter were going to leave him as Judith's success in the acting industry grew. At the time of this manipulative incident, Judith was hired to be a cast member in the film Jaws 4, and as a result needed to travel to the Bahamas for the filming. In an attempt to convince his wife and daughter not to go, Joseph created a fake letter that stated a relative from Hungary had recently passed away. When the bogus telegram did not work, Joseph threatened little Judith with a knife to her throat, stating, "If you decide not to come back, I will cut your throat." Judith was obviously terrified and later began sobbing after she left the airport, her father's last words to her being, "Remember what I told you before you left." Maria was also threatened by her husband, as Joseph threatened to burn down the home if Judith and Maria left for the Bahamas. Joseph went as far as to show his wife where he was hiding the gasoline in the home. Despite his threats, the mother and daughter left for Jaws 4. Judith and Maria were gone for 2 months, and when they returned, Joseph continued to abuse them both. At one point, Maria bought an excited Judith a kite. Judith was over the moon and wanted to fly the kite immediately. Joseph then tried to grab the kite from Judith, which the little girl quickly tried to protect, worried her father would break the kite. Joseph responded to the little girl's hesitance by calling her a spoiled brat for not wanting to share her toys with her father, before he snatched the kite and broke it into pieces in front of his wife and daughter. Another incident resulted in Joseph throwing pots and pans at Judith, reminiscent of the incident with his past wife Carla. One of these pots hit the little girl, and Judith had a very bloody nose. She later told her friend about the incident, saying, quote, "I'm afraid to go home. My daddy is miserable. My daddy is drunk every day, and I know he wants to kill my mother." End quote. Judith was so stressed over her home life that she began to gain weight. The little girl began to develop obsessive-compulsive habits, such as pulling out her own eyebrows and pulling out her pet cat's whiskers. During her voice audition for All Dogs Go to Heaven in 1988, Judith broke down and began sobbing uncontrollably, causing her agent, Hansen, to beg Maria to take the little girl to a psychologist. Maria did take Judith to a child psychologist, who found multiple signs of physical and emotional abuse and reported her case to Child Protective Services. Child Services began to investigate the Barsi home. However, Maria told Child Services that she was planning to divorce Joseph and move out with Judith to their private apartment they already rented to escape from Joseph during the day. Child Services dropped the case after hearing about Maria's plan. In a lot of domestic abuse cases, you hear of witnesses or third persons avoiding the abusive situation entirely and letting the victim suffer in silence or isolation. This case is a bit different in retrospect. People in the neighborhood were very aware of the family's abusive situation. and often told Maria that she and Judith were welcome to find refuge in their homes, away from Joseph. Many neighbors regularly talked to Maria and gave her advice on Joseph and Judith. Some neighbors even attempted to talk to Joseph, who constantly was threatening to kill himself or his wife. One could easily argue the neighbors should have called the police at this point instead of talking to Joseph, but that's fairly easy to say in retrospect now. Despite many neighbors offering her and her daughter refuge from Joseph, Maria turned them down, either out of pride or fear that Joseph would hurt the well-meaning neighbors. A close friend of Maria was Eunice Daly, who was the next-door neighbor of the family. Maria would often confide in Eunice about moving into her and Judith's private apartment permanently. Eunice would later say that Maria claimed she could not leave Joseph or the home because she needed to focus on her daughter's career, and that all their prized possessions were in the home, and it would be impossible to leave with them without Joseph finding out they were moving. Later, Maria would admit to Eunice that Joseph was constantly threatening her by saying he was going to kill her and Judith and then set the house on fire. On the day of Monday, July 25th, 1988, Joseph Barsi took out a .32 caliber pistol and went upstairs to his daughter, Judith Barsi's room. While little Judith lay in bed, her father shot her in the back of the head, killing the 10-year-old instantly. A few minutes later, Joseph wandered back outside into the hallway, where he shot his wife Maria in the back of the head, killing her instantly as well. Joseph apparently just wandered around the house till Tuesday morning. Judith's agent, Hansen, had a conversation on the phone with Joseph that morning, as Joseph announced to her that he was moving out permanently and just needed time to say goodbye to Judith. After hanging up the phone, Joseph began pouring gasoline on the bodies of Judith and Maria before lighting the match and setting them both alight. Joseph then went to the garage with his pistol and empty gas can in hand before putting the gun to his head and shooting himself dead in the garage. Neighbors were quick to notice the fire breaking out in the Barsi home. Maria's friend and neighbor, Eunice, was later interviewed about the horrible event. From the Los Angeles Times, 3 dead in apartment murder-suicide on July 28, 1988, quote, "I heard an explosion and I saw smoke rising from the house," Daly said. "My first thought as I ran to call 911 was, he's done it. He's killed them and set a fire in the house, just like he said he would." Another neighbor, Michael Cutt, said he took Daly's garden hose and opened a rear sliding door, but could not get through the smoke to fight the flames. End quote. The house was pretty much destroyed by the time firefighters had put out the flames. Police found the charred remains of Judith in her bed and Maria in the hallway. In the garage, police found Joseph's body with a gas can 4 feet away from him and a gun next to his corpse. Judith and Maria were buried together in connected plots. The little girl was given a gravestone that had her famous catchphrase from her role as Ducky from The Land Before Time, which was the last role she ever acted in. Nobody really cared about what happened to Joseph. From what I could gather from his wiki page, no one even knows if he was buried or cremated. Both All Dogs Go to Heaven and The Land Before Time were released after Judith's death. Her voice roles as Anne-Marie and Ducky, charming many. When Judith was voice acting for All Dogs Go to Heaven, the director of the film, Don Bluth, was very impressed with Judith's abilities and was quoted as saying, "Absolutely astonishing. She understands verbal direction, even for the most sophisticated situations." End quote. The song Love Survives, played in All Dogs Go to Heaven, was dedicated to Judith's memory. Domestic abuse and child abuse happens much more frequently than we would like to think. In my description, I have left a few numbers to contact if you suspect child abuse or domestic violence in your community. Social services and outreach centers are notoriously underfunded. However, In this broken system, there are still plenty of people who want to help those in need of shelter, protection, or care, regardless of your gender, age, or sexuality. There are people out there who want to help you, and I urge anybody who needs their services to reach out. You deserve to be happy.